Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's quarterfinals debate. My name is Patrick Henschke, and I am the chairman of this debate. The timekeeper is Sylvie Jaggard. This debate will be judged by a panel of 3 adjudicators, who are Miss Zabo, Miss Boy-Turner, and Mr. Aidman. The topic of this debate is that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. The affirmative team, seated to my right, is from Pembroke School, and the negative team, seated to my left, is from Westminster School. The speaking time for this debate is 5 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time, and a double bell will sound at the speaking time. Please ensure that your phones are switched off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Tim Dong.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Chairman, the topic for tonight's debate is that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. We, the affirmative team, believe this to be true. We define this topic as parents being the legal carers or guardians of children, and repeatedly and as over and over again on multiple occasions, constantly, even after warning. The Oxford Dictionary's definition of fail is to neglect to do something, and we believe that for this debate, this definition is more relevant than Oxford's other definition, which is being unsuccessful in achieving one's goal. Continuing, we define children as any school students between reception to 16 years of age, and school as an institution for educating children. And this also includes government-approved learning programs, such as homeschooling. Finishing, the Oxford Dictionary defines prosecuted as to have legal action taken against in court, which usually results in a fine or a sentence. To summarize, we define this topic as that legal carers or guardians who continually neglect to send their children between reception to 16 years of age to an institution of education or approved learning program over and over again on multiple occasions, even after warning, should have legal action taken against them in court. And we, the affirmative team, believe the statement to be true. Tonight, as first speaker, I will be presenting 2 points: how the system only works to punish neglectful parents, and how important it is that children are not missing school. Our second speaker, Jason, will discuss how the system deters parents from truancy, and also about how prosecution should be the last resort. Our third speaker, Zach, will rebut and sum up our team's case. Beginning with my first point, I will outline how the system will only prosecute parents who are lazy or neglectful. This system has already been set up. However, it is currently unenforced by the government. Parents are prosecuted in this system if the child is a chronic absentee, defined by the government as a student who has missed more than 10 days of the school term, which is 20% of a term. According to the Department of Education's website on compulsory school attendance, these absent days do not include sick days, as sick students are advised to stay home. Furthermore, approved absences, such as funerals for close relatives, don't count towards chronic absences. But aside from sick days and approved leaves, there are even more exemptions to this system. According to South Australia's Minister of Education, students who have missed 10 days in a term will not get marked as a chronic absentee as long as they have less than 3 of such absent days within the last 3 months. There is enough leniency in this system for the families who do follow this law. There's also leniency for struggling families, as the South Australian Education Minister describes it. This system will not be pursued against families who are struggling with issues like mental illness, domestic violence, or poverty. If there is no legitimate reason to be absent, and a student is still absent for over 20% of a school term, then there is a clear parenting issue which needs addressing. This is the basis of my second point. My second point is about how parents who deny their children of education deserve to be prosecuted. For obvious reasons, school is important. Without it, we wouldn't be here tonight. School is essential to achieve a stable life in our modern society. A 2016 report by Attendance Works shows that missing even 2 days of school a month can greatly reduce academic achievement. Furthermore, research conducted by the Healthy Schools campaign found that absenteeism is a better predictor of dropouts than the previous year's test results. There's a reason school attendance is compulsory. Everyone has a right to sufficient education, and it should be therefore enforced as such. As an example, in 2019, the parents of a 4-year-old boy denied him the treatment for leukemia, instead forcing unproven herbal treatments on the child. The parents were prosecuted as they denied the child of a right. While this may seem like an extreme example, neglecting children's education is a similar case because it's denying them the right to education, which will inevitably lead to irreparable harm for their future and therefore deserves prosecution. To conclude, this system isn't going to affect the majority of families who follow the law on compulsory school attendance, but only the families who are actively denying their children the right to education. If you miss 8 days a term, by the end of primary school, you would have missed a whole year worth of education. And it takes 10 days a term of illegitimate absences before serious legal action is taken against these parents, who at that point definitely should be prosecuted. Thank you.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Ellie Mathman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. We would like to add to the definition that repeatedly means more than 10 days without a diagnosed medical reason, according to the laws of SA. Although it has already been stated in the affirmative team's case, we believe it should be in the definition. However, we, the negative team, believe this statement is false. The first speaker said that a boy got denied leukemia treatment. This is incorrect. Well, this shouldn't have been used because the reasons behind him not getting the treatment could have been many other things rather than his parents denying him the access to it. It could have been money and lots of other issues going on. We don't know the backstory behind this. The first affirmative speaker has also stated it is important that children do not miss school. This statement does not consider other aspects of life, as we don't know what's going on with the families, and there's lots of reasons students can be missing school. Today's first speaker, I'll be talking to you about how prosecution will only make a child's life worse. The financial pressure on basic needs will cause too much stress, and about my last point on well-being of the whole family. Our second speaker is talking to you about how there is little parents can do to force their child to attend school for reasons other than non-attendance are complex, and the additional pressure damages already marginalised people. I'll be discussing 3 points. My first point is that prosecuting a parent for a student's lack of attendance in school may in fact make that child's life worse. Life is complex, and when a parent is going through a difficult time, a child will often experience similar feelings or worry about them. This may occur, for example, if a parent was required to pay a large fine or serve time in prison. That is a devastating event for a child to experience. Now to my second point, financial stress, which is a problem in many households. According to NAB, 77% of Australians are not financially secure, with 31% are under financial stress, unable to pay for basics. If a parent faces a hefty fine for their child not attending school, this will cause additional stress and financial hardship on the family. There are, of course, special circumstances and prosecution may be dropped. However, many people will not qualify for that exemption. They are stuck paying a fine, but they could put financial stress on the families. This will place another burden and further reduce their capacity to ensure their children's attendance. Furthermore, once a fine is imposed, there is no incentive for parents to continue to work towards getting their child to school. Therefore, imposing a simplistic punishment to a complex issue will do little to encourage parents to deal with the absent issues. It ignores the circumstances that a family may be experiencing, placing them under financial hardship, possibly increasing the stress they already face. Let's support, not punish. According to Dr. Sullivan from 9news.com, when a parent goes to jail, the child has a greater likelihood of being abusive and having serious mental health issues when they grow up. Arara Sinha from Jakarta Post also states that when a parent gets fined, the child will feel the stress, and these sources go on to state that the further school absence is likely. Children will suffer if parents are prosecuted for not sending their child to school. Let's support, not punish. My last point concerns well-being. Although the government has already stated they will not persecute families with circumstances that call for an exemption, how are they ascertain the truth or extent of a given issue? Not all these problems can be granted an exemption, and therefore it's inevitable that families will be prosecuted unfairly. When a child refuses to attend school, there is often more to the problem that is obvious to the outside observer. The added stress of an investigation and possible prosecution of the parent is not going to help. Even if a family was granted an exemption, the strain of going through the process of investigation and the fear of prosecution could add to the underlying issues which is causing the truancy. Prosecuting or investigating the parents does nothing to change the situation for the child. In fact, may cause a deterioration in the child's mental health from the stress caused by the prosecution. This is not the way a society should be operating. Families in this situation must be supported, not punished. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we firmly believe that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should not be persecuted. We all know it's not always the parent's fault, but it will always make the child's life worse. Let's support, not punish.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Jason Kang.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman. The topic for this debate is that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. We, the affirmative team, strongly agree with this statement. Firstly, I'll be rebutting against the negative team's arguments. The negative team's first speaker has tried to tell you that prosecuting a child's parents will cause lots of harm to the child. We acknowledge this. However, what other options do we have if the parent continually refuses to cooperate with us? Should we just let the parent keep denying their children's education? If the parent keeps failing to send their child to school, then this will cause even more damage than if we don't intervene. Prosecution is ugly, but sometimes there are no alternatives when the crime has been repeated multiple times with no signs of stopping. The negative team's first speaker has also tried to tell you that some parents are not able to send their child to school for poverty reasons. We fully acknowledge that some families do live in financial stress. However, the law exempts these parents. As stated by our first speaker, the SA Department of Education says that the law does not apply to families who are experiencing poverty, domestic violence, or other unavoidable family reasons. This means that only parents who are perfectly financially capable of sending their children to school will be prosecuted under this law. I'll be presenting 2 points tonight. Firstly, I will talk about how prosecution deters parents from truancy and how this will promote attendance. I will also be arguing how prosecution is our only option if warnings simply don't work. Firstly, parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted, as prosecution deters these parents from truancy. As stated by our first speaker, a parent failing to send their child to school is detrimental, as education is highly important. One way of deterring this is to punish those parents who are repeatedly being truant. By having a punishment attached, this will legitimize the fact that education is mandatory and that truancy is a severe offence. If there is a risk of prosecution for parents, then parents will take more care into ensuring that their child does not reach that 10 days of absenteeism in a term. This in turn promotes attendance, because now the parents know that they can't get away with neglecting their child's educational needs. If more parents commit and cater for their child's education, then this will ultimately benefit both the student and Australia as a whole. The point of the law in general is to deter people from committing crimes and therefore create positive societal change. The same logic applies here, because the 10-day threshold deters parents from overly neglecting their child's education, something that will promote greater attendance levels. We acknowledge that prosecution might not always be the best method to achieve this. However, it contributes to deterring the parents who don't see importance in education or are simply lazy. Therefore, parents should be prosecuted for repeatedly failing to send their children to school, as this serves as a deterrent for parents for truancy. Furthermore, prosecution is the last resort against parents that have repeatedly ignored warnings from schools. Prosecution only occurs, as stated by our first speaker, if a child has missed more than 10 days of a school term. If a child misses 5 or 6 days, for example, then a simple warning will be handed out to the parent. However, the problem is that this warning won't work against every parent. Some parents will continue to not send their child to school even after this email, even after communications with the school. Well then, what do we do if we have exhausted all of our non-legal methods? What do we do if a child misses half a term's worth of schooling even after we contacted their parents? Should we just keep sending emails home and pray that will do the trick? Prosecution in this case might be the only option we have. If all non-legal methods to prevent truancy fails, then we are left with no other choice. Prosecution is not the first option when it comes to absenteeism. However, if the behaviour is repeated multiple times and after multiple warnings, as such with the case of this topic, then prosecution is absolutely the suitable solution. Therefore, parents should be prosecuted for failing to send their children to school, as there exists a point where merely giving warnings will not do enough. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, that is why we, the Affirmative team, strongly believe that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Zara Chowdhury.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. We, the negative team, believe that this statement is irrefutably false. Tonight, our first speaker has already spoken to you about how prosecuting the parents will make the child's life significantly worse. She then went on to elaborate on the financial stress and pressure on well-being these prosecutions could cause to the families. As second speaker, I'll be talking to you about how there is very little to what parents can do to force their child to go to school. I'll also be explaining how we should look into supporting the parents to address the causes of the absences rather than jumping to prosecute them.
Furthermore, I will be elaborating on how these prosecutions with a focus on punishment is detrimental to numerous minority groups who already have difficulties attending schools. A third speaker will rebut and sum up our team's case. Before I go into continue with my arguments, I'd first like to point out the many flaws in the opposition team's case. The first affirmative speaker has stated that the parents who deny education of children should be prosecuted. This statement is evidently flawed, as there are reasons behind the parents denying their children to be sent to school. As I will further elaborate in my debate, it is often the child who refuses to attend, which again is for reasons such as bullying and the child's mental health. The second affirmative speaker has rebutted that there are no alternatives to prosecution. This is clearly false. As I will further explain in my debate, the government must look into supporting the parents, address the cause of the absence. The opposition has also stated that parents who deny their children the right to education must be prosecuted. This is wrong. Placing a legal and financial burdens on parents will not help truancy. A Queensland University of Technology report by Professor Sally Vanham found that prosecution had little meaningful deterrent effect. The opposition has pointed out that the law exempts poverty. We acknowledge the statement made. However, this is not the point we have stated. We stated that just because the family isn't in poverty doesn't mean it will cause financial hardship and stress. Now to my first point, that the extent to which parents can force their child to go to school is limited. This is especially true regards to many teenagers who are physically the same size, if not bigger, than their parents, which removes the physical advantage parents have over their children. If a child willingly refuses to go to school, there is very little the parent can do. They cannot physically force their child to get out of bed, get dressed, and assure that they're at school. Furthermore, the child who is already unwilling to be at school but is forced to be there will not be actively learning. Prosecution in these cases would punish parents who are trying to do the right thing and not address any of the reasons why the student does not want to go to school. Now to my second point, that this type of school refusal is a symptom of a wider, complex problem that parents must not be punished for. In most cases, when a child is refusing to go to school, there is an underlying problem. According to Rachel Busman, a licensed clinical psychologist at the Child Mind Institute, most kids who refuse to go to school fall into one or more of the four categories of bullying, academics, behavior, and anxiety. As our first speaker explained, the added stress of investigation and possible prosecution of parents is not going to help with underlying problems or causes of absence. Furthermore, prosecution is not considered an intervention method in the Department of Education strategies to date, as the Attendance Matters booklet published by the DFE clearly indicates. Therefore, it is vital to determine the underlying cause of absence and support families to address that cause rather than punish parents for their child's absence, which is the symptom of the problem and not the problem itself. Finally, a focus on punishment is not helpful to many groups who already have difficulties attending school. Certain groups of students who may simply struggle just to get to school, with Indigenous and international students being particularly negatively affected, according to data collected by the Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership. Physical punishment or sentencing in these cases further marginalises groups already struggling within the broader Australian society. According to the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, a variety of complex interrelated factors influence a student's absenteeism. These factors may be related to the individual student, their parents, families, their school, socioeconomic situation, or their sociocultural context. Understanding the complex interactions between these factors is crucial to addressing the problematic attendance. A one-size-fits-all punishment model fails to take into account the variety of factors which may be preventing the child from attending the school. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, it is unwaveringly evident that the parents who repeatedly do not send their children to school should not be prosecuted, as the reasons are complex and will not be solved by this simplistic solution.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Zaki.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe this statement. I will first rebut some of the negative team's points and then summarise our team's case. The negative team's first speaker has tried to tell you that some parents may not be able to send their children to school because of financial stress and poverty. In contrast to this, public schools are actually very cheap to attend for students. There are also many organisations that aim to help kids who are living under the poverty line and attend schools, such as social workers or charitable organisations. In addition to this, as covered by our other speakers, both the resource provided by Debating SA and the law state that there are exceptions to being prosecuted. These include health issues, violence and poverty. This means that this point is actually obsolete, as people living in poverty will not be prosecuted. The negative's first speaker has also tried to tell you that prosecuting a child's parents does a lot of harm to the child. The fact is, not having a proper education also does significant amounts of damage to the child. And whilst we do agree that a parent being prosecuted is not ideal, if the prosecution could lead to the child getting a better education, it is worth it, as this is what is going to shape their life and the future generation. The fact is, this is what currently seems to be the best option available, and, in this situation, the pros outweigh the cons. The negative team has also tried to tell you that families' well-being could be affected. However, doesn't the neglection of a child seem to result in a larger lowering of well-being than the family looked at, than not prosecuting the family? The negative team's second speaker has tried to tell you that because a child could skip school because they might be physically stronger than their parent. Whilst it is true that a child could skip school, this point is not completely true. First of all, it is the parent's responsibility to make sure that their child is getting to school. If they are not appropriately doing this, the student is skipping, chances are they are not good parents. In addition to this, they did say that they could be physically overpowering. However, there are resources out there available for this, and the parents can use that if needed. Lastly, there are exemptions to this law. One of these, according to the Department of Education, states that if the child is being disobedient despite the parents' best efforts, they will not be prosecuted. This was also brought up by our first speaker. The negative team's second speaker has tried to tell you that we should not punish, but we should support. Whilst there are alternatives like supporting, we strongly believe that this is a highly effective method. If a system without prosecution is used, there is significantly less incentive for the parents to make an effort than in a system with prosecution. So, as covered by our second speaker, prosecution can be a very effective deterrent from doing the wrong thing for parents. In addition to this, there is also a lot of support for families in bad times already, such as charities or social workers. Now, I will summarise our team's case. Our first speaker, Tim, spoke to you about how hard it actually is to be prosecuted for truancy. This is because you need to be away for 10 days for it to actually happen. And there are also lots of exceptions. He also spoke about how it can be detrimental for a student to miss school, more particularly the 10 days needed for action to take place. This is because, as some of the statistics he brought up, even a minimal amount of school being lost could cause detrimental effects for the child. Our second speaker, Jason, spoke to you about how prosecution deters parents from neglecting their child's educational needs, greatly benefiting the student. This is because he also argued that prosecution will only affect parents who have repeatedly committed truancy and ignored warnings. This is because first offenders will often not have the same prosecution, the same effect to them, which is good because if it was an honest mistake, then this can be corrected for the future. In conclusion, parents should be prosecuted for failing to send their child to school. Every child has the right to learn. Every child deserves to have this right enforced. The best way to sufficiently enforce this right is to threaten people who break the law with prosecution. This adds a whole new level of incentive for the parent to follow the rules, much like following road rules, as they do not want to be fined. Education is what shapes a person, and not having this could be detrimental to the future. Having prosecution in place could have a multitude of positive effects, hence why this must occur. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Ryan George.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for our debate is that parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school should be prosecuted. We, the negative team, firmly believe that the statement is false. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that this system will only pursue neglectful or lazy parents. He mentioned that those suffering from poverty and other socio-economic issues will not be pursued. However, it will likely be difficult for the Department of Education to ascertain the line between neglect and social struggles. Absentees are in fact most often from dysfunctional or damaged homes, according to ACARA statistics, or even from marginalised communities. Prosecuting these parents will just burden these families further, and that will even further diminish their ability to effectively educate their children. He has also tried to tell you that parents who deny their children the right to education must be prosecuted. This is a flawed statement. Placing financial and legal burdens on parents is not going to help truancy. As our speakers previously said, a Queensland University of Technology report, reported on by Professor Sally Varnum, found that prosecution had little meaningful deterrent effect. And, as our previous speakers said, not all reasons for absence may be immediately apparent, and parents cannot always be held to blame. The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that a lack of parental cooperation is grounds for prosecution, and all speakers have mentioned that other options may not be present, or that prosecution is the best option. We strongly disagree with this statement. The South Australian Government's Attendance Matters report illustrates a support matrix that should be followed. It states that engagement with parents and schools to form a management and support network should come first, before prosecution. And this rarely occurs, according to a 2010 report analysed by the Commissioner for Children and Young Adults. And as we have continually said, supportive measures must be pursued ahead of punitive ones. The third affirmative speaker has stated that even if the parent is prosecuted, the child will receive the education as the parent has been threatened with a fine or other legal retribution. This statement is flawed. Without proper guidance and support, the children will still be suffering from the same issues that probably led to the truancy, which will make leading a good life just as difficult. He has also assumed that students' decisions to skip school are reflective of parents' inability to parent. This is a flawed assumption to make. Our first speaker spoke to you about how prosecution of the parents of truant children will worsen their children's lives. She also said that fines and other legal penalties would compound pre-existing stresses on many families' financial situations. Her third point was that prosecution could greatly impact overall family well-being. Our second speaker spoke to you about how parents may not always be responsible for truancy, and how there may often be legitimate reasons for absences, just maybe not ones that are communicated. Her second point was that oppressive punishment is unlikely to improve attendance rates, as the sources I've cited earlier backed up. She also outlined how various means of support to improve attendance rate would be better for all parties involved, parents, schools, and the students. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we, the negative team, staunchly believe that prosecuting parents who repeatedly fail to send their children to school is wrong. It is merely an impulsive measure that fails to address the underlying issues leading to truancy. In the words of 3 researchers on this topic from Coventry and Roehampton Universities, non-attendance at school should be treated as a child welfare issue and not a criminal justice issue. As we have reiterated, we should support and not punish. Thank you.
While the adjudicators finalise the result, I'll read this evening's chairman notices. We're delighted to announce that the grand finals will be held in the House of Assembly Chamber, Parliament House, on Saturday, September 24, 2022. Topic and side information for the semi-finals will be available on the Debating SA website from tomorrow morning. Please be sure to check your side and debate time information carefully. Debates will be held here at the same venue next week. I invite a representative of the adjudication panel to come forward and announce the result.
As you have no doubt noticed, there was a panel of 3 adjudicators marking tonight's debate. We all mark independently, which means tonight no individual speaker feedback will be given. I'm going to award the Division Debating Award tonight and also let you know the result. So tonight the Division Debating Award goes to Tim. Would you like to come up and collect it? And tonight the panel has come to a unanimous decision to award the debate to the affirmative team. Congratulations, guys.
I call upon a member of the runner-up team to give a vote of thanks.
First of all, Pembroke, congratulations guys, great debate, all the best for the semi-finals. Thank you to the 3 adjudicators for adjudicating our debate. Thank you to the chairman and timekeeper. And finally, thank you to our parents and coaches and everyone here in the audience for supporting us. I don't want to say this, but instead of sitting on the couch watching TV.
I call upon a member of the winning team to second that vote of thanks.
Well, of course, I'd like to thank the adjudicators. Obviously, can't run a debate without someone to score it. And of course, the opposing team, really good debate. Most certainly would have been to the point, really close. You all did really, really well. Timekeeper and chairperson, thank you very much. Of course, the audience, need the audience, support. And the location, the venue here at Nazareth is really good and helpful facility for us to have available to us, and debating essay for making this whole thing possible. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.